Hey, it's Mosquito, also known as Chris. Welcome back to the shop. We are getting back to the walker turner. Been a while for those of you that have been following this one, and timing is good. Said no one ever. But we're going to start tearing this thing apart because I really got to get this taken care of because I need to reclaim some shop space, and having 4 table saws around doesn't accomplish that. First things first, I'm going to take off the Arbor stuff. Since this is a direct drive, I'm going to take off this nut and then the blade stabilizer. I need to take off the bolts that go all the way through. So these are threaded rods that go all the way through. There's 4 of those. And then there's going to be 1, 2, 3 bolts that hold this front bell housing on. We got to get all those done. So the little ones are 3/8 and the bigger ones are 1/2 inch, at least on my motor. So here's one of those rods. It's just threaded on both ends and then the 2 nuts. I like those orange gloves because they're a little bit tougher, but these ones are a lot easier to use. So once you get those bolts out, it basically just pulls out of the rest of it, but you might have to, kind of like I did, I twisted it while I was taking it apart just to make sure. All right, let's get something to deal with that because that is a lot. What do you think? Should I save it, throw it back in? So I'm kind of keeping an eye out on this one in particular, just to make sure that it's still good. Because if you need to replace one of them, good luck. It's kind of interesting because it's supposed to stop this thing from basically just chewing itself up. It'll kind of let go and just stop the blade while the motor still spins instead of just stalling out, which is kind of cool. All right, I'm going to set this aside for now, and we are going to focus on this guy. So one of the things that I will advise you on, there's a bunch of parts in here that all get stacked up. Keep track of them. Last time I took this, the other motor apart for my other saw, it's still sitting like that because I forgot to record this part for the order. So you've got your bolt that holds in the arbor through a bearing, and then there's a lock washer, and then this sort of like reinforced washer that's supposed to go in where the bearing is. Next thing is that there are 2 set screws that you got to take out. And I'm just going to go ahead and take these all the way out. The trick about this is you got to try and drive that out. It's not perfect, but it's what I got. The key is to get your dowel wedged in with that key that's in there. See, that's what I'm talking about. We have a nice dowel with a key. So once you get the arbor shaft far enough out, that gear that's in there is loose. So once it comes off of there, technically you can get that out of there. So there's that guy, super clean. And I'm almost all the way through the bearing on that one. Holding it like this. So I've got my hand on the bell here, but I'm also holding down here so I don't drop it, because that wouldn't be fun. There we go. So there's our arbor. There is like a fiber washer that goes in between here, and then there's actually a corresponding seal right here that we're going to have to get out. First thing I'm going to do is pound out this bearing. Huh, I wonder if somebody's been in here. This is a sealed bearing, not a shielded. And I feel like sealed like this, because you see that green seal, I feel like that would be way too modern. Actually still kind of smooth though. And then there's one more bearing here that I'm going to try and drive out this way. Is my rod long enough? No. Maybe. Barely? There's the one I was looking for. Suffice it to say, if you're planning on keeping these bearings, don't do this. Yeah, this one is too. I'm going with somebody's been in here. Because this is another sealed on one side, shielded on the other. Before we lose track of things, here's our stack up. We had a bearing, we had this spacing tube, then we had this, then we had our washer, and then we had this bearing, and then this guy. So that is what is in here in that orientation. Remember that. So I don't have to. All right. I've got my cleaning tote, and let's get to cleaning some of this stuff up. I am just trying with some simple green first to see how that does. And if we don't get anywhere with that, well, we'll see where we progress from there. So what I just realized is that is still in there, and that is supposed to come out. That's what those set screws were holding in place. Clean this up a little bit. Let's work on getting that out of there. Let's see this thing starting to come out. So there's our ring, and this goes with the stepped part goes out. So it was in there like so. I'm just going to talk through some of this to see if I can remember it later. So the tricky thing is, this gear doesn't fit through here, doesn't fit through there. So it has to go in like such. So that's the way we have to put that in there, which is going to be kind of a pain. This was first, and then we're going to have a bearing actually that goes all the way up onto here. So that whole assembly we're going to have to put back together. So we'll just pretend like we've got a bearing here. And then once we have that bearing on, we have to put that in place. Then we slide that in here. We put it up into here to the point where we can get this gear in place. And then we get that gear in place. And then we drop our washer on. And then we put the other bearing in to the top. That sounds exciting. Thanks for walking through that with me. I sometimes need to think things through. Okay. Hey, it's a heck of a lot easier to clean that way. All right, by no means done, but by most definitions better. So I think I will leave some of that for later because we'll have some other parts to clean up here in a little bit. Well, I say a little bit, but it might be tomorrow. And we are going to start working on the rest of this motor. I'm just going to try and clean some of this stuff off so it's a little bit easier to work with. We got a bolt in the end of it. If you can get it without having to grab the thing on the inside, that is preferred. Nope, I didn't. I just slipped the clutch. So this can just slip. So if the motor stops, the rest of it can kind of just keep slipping. Got it. Holy crap, don't put them on that tight. We've got our fine threaded bolt with a washer. And we've got this sort of like spring washer type thing. And it's important to note that the concave side is towards our fiber gear here. So this definitely seems like it would have been a hole intended to help take it out because it doesn't go all the way through and it's not tapped. We've got a key. And I think this is another form of seal that goes into the front. So once again, we've got that bolt, our pressure washer, spring washer, whatever you want to call it, our fiber gear, our cone. Then this goes on there like this. So that's our stack up here. Next thing I'm going to do is take off the capacitor housing, start capacitor. And the reason for that is that one side is, in fact, attached to that front bell housing. The other thing that kind of makes me think that it's been into before is that this is all banged up. And having done it, I do know just how much of a pain in the butt that is. Are these spade connectors? Nice. And for those curious, the one that's on this one is a CSP 400 to 480, 110, 125 VAC, 60 volt cycle. Hi, Toro Supply Co. Box 604. Hey, Hopkins, Minnesota. Next town over for me. That's kind of cool. No idea if that works. All right. I'm not one to intentionally cause more harm than I need to. So if they fit, I will take them out that way. All right, so those came out. Whoop. That is not what I wanted to do. It's going to be a pain because I'm going to have to press that through. Because there are some wires over here that are attached to the front of here. Oh god, why do I put the heavy toolbox on the top shelf? Is this one big enough? No. When you can just do this by hand? Look at that. I don't know why that was such a big problem in the first place, huh? Okay, so before we go pulling anything off of there, there we go. Ooh, that looks toasty. I'm remembering some things, and I'm thinking that might not be the right set of bearings, because that came out way too easy. I wonder if that one will too. If it doesn't pop out, there's at least a lot of play in it. Okay, I need to get you in here for that. So these are the wires attached that I was talking about. This blue and that black are our start windings, and then these are our start capacitor. But in that contact, and I don't know if it's because it's dirty or if it had some issues in the past, but we're gonna have to clean that up a little bit because there's a little bit of charring around some of that in there. But for now, just gotta grab our screwdriver and get those out of there. I'm going to get our trusty wooden whacker here. Pop out our bearing. And now the other thing to be careful of is this thing here. So this is actually just a shield, but it is pressed in. And if you can avoid it, I would probably just leave it in there. I took the last one out, and boy, it sure was a pain in the butt to get everything back into where it needed to be without banging it up and getting it all messed up. So I'm gonna plan on trying to leave that in there. So this bearing, I'm pretty sure there was a screw at one point, because look at that. I wonder if we can bang that back down, if it'll come out. Because if not, that could suck. All right, well that worked. So I was able to kind of pound that back down, so let's see if it'll come out now. Of course, my screwdriver's too big. Use this one. Thanks, Grandpa. Nope. Shoot. So that's half of the head, and I figured that was going to happen. Okay. Oh, geez, I'm sorry. You can't see what I'm doing on the close-up. Why didn't you tell me? Just kind of chasing that around a little bit here until I can get it out. I don't think I can grab that by hand yet. Oh, a little bit closer. All right, so we're gonna have to find a new one of those. Got it. All right, but basically that is what held the bearing in place. Now that I'm thinking about it, that may have been my fault. Whoops. I didn't notice the screw there, so I ended up just kind of beating it out of there. Okay. So now the question is, what are these bearings? This is an NSK, so that's already wrong. This would have had SKF. 6202. So originally, in that end, it would have been an SKF FL15, and those are discontinued. 6202 is the correct replacement. However, you need some spacer shims, because the goofy thing about the OEM bearings is that it was basically a 6202, but the inner race stuck out a little bit further, and that's the part that's really hard to find. This is the kit from Walker Turner Service Machinery, so they sell the bearing plus the spacers that you need. So there's a 6202-10 and a 6202-1 just plain, and yeah, so anyway, that comes from Walker Turner Service Machinery. I did find somebody from Ekron Bearing that was able to find some actual FL15 bearings, and the 202 FS7s were the two that were supposed to fit this, but then I ended up getting the ones from Walker Turner Service Machines, so that's what I'm going to use. If you're willing to fork out for them, you might still be able to find them. Again, that's FL15 and 202 FS7. And then the other bearings, wherever those went, that go in here are nothing special. They're just 6203. Just clean up some of this sawdust here. Oh, and there's also Sharpie mark with an X on it in here too. Probably not factory. That one might actually be a correct bearing. Looks pretty good though. So that is a good sign. So far, this one's looking good actually. So this wire being cut was me. Well, me and Doug. This was the one that we tore apart in the back of his truck in a parking garage. And he was still an hour and a half from home. It was raining and a weeknight. So what we did was we left the two wires from the power cable. That's a good trick to know, by the way, is if you have a power cord and you're in a hurry and you need to remove it because you're not going to keep it, leave some in the wire nuts rather than taking them off, because now I know that black and white go in here. In case you're curious, it's 8 and 1 is tied together for black, and then 4 and 5 is tied together with white, and then 3 and 2 are tied together. Again, I'm mostly saying that for your benefit, not so that I'll remember later. Thank you. All right, so we'll get these out of here. Boy, I might have to work on that a little bit. There's some dingers in it. This thing saw a rough life at some point. This sort of brown cloth wrapped. This is what I was expecting to see. Not so much that green from the other side, which is interesting. Probably somebody was in here cleaning some stuff up. The good news is all of these wires appear to still be pretty good. I don't see anything that's cracking. I don't see anything out of the ordinary. They're all still pretty bendable. Yeah, I don't really see anything in this one that's cause for concern, at least as far as I'm concerned. It's possible that some of these were replaced, because this one has some more modern writing on it. Actually, a lot of these do. I wonder if this motor was rebuilt at one point. So I've done a little bit of cleaning, just using a soft brush, kind of dusting, basically, because I'm just trying not to get too aggressive with the motor just because I don't want to damage anything. Dry lubricant for the centrifugal switch. A screw that runs through from the inside to a nut on the inside of the actual cover where all the wires are. So I'm just going to take that off so that I can do a better job of cleaning and painting. So in there's this little kind of bushing spacer that goes in right here that just kind of shields the wires as they go through. And then we've got this. Kind of checking to see if there's any areas where they kind of flare out on the ends, because people will like grab them this way, pick them up, or do something, you know, they'll just kind of get beat on in the middle. But there's all these tabs around the outside on the ends. So what ends up happening is they sort of get flared at the bottom, and I don't really like that. It doesn't look good, and it doesn't sit well. I had not noticed that before. This thing's been repaired. Seems to sit pretty good though, so I don't think I'm too concerned about it. All the little things that you find out when you start tearing things apart. This was the top surface that goes against the bearing, and it looks like we've got 2 stacked spring washers. So that's these weird wavy looking things. So there's 2 of those stacked where the prongs kind of go up. So the center part is lower. The outside is up towards our bearing. And then we've got 2 stacked flat washers, kind of the smaller, narrower ones. So there's a little set screw at an angle here. The outer cap is the part that says SKF bearings on it, and that fits same size as that inner cap. And that's kind of just to help hold any grease and whatnot, because they used to be open bearings, and then that other cap just goes on the outside. All right, I've got things cleaned up. So I kind of went around with a Scotch-Brite pad, scuffed everything up, and then hit it with some lacquer thinner and just cleaned all the dust off and cleaned everything off. Depends on the piece, but things like this, I'm gonna tape off the badge because I want to keep it. It doesn't look great, but yeah, whatever. Machine surfaces like this, I'm gonna make sure that I tape that off. Anything where a bearing is gonna sit, stuff like that, just kind of tape it all off and get to painting, I guess. So let's talk painting strategy, because I'm probably not going to film much of this because it's usually just sort of chaos. Trying to get stuff outside, get it painted, bring it back in. A couple of different things. One, I'm going to use the Farman Implement, call it low gloss black. And this is the same black that I used for like the pinstriping on the table saw itself. The point that I wanted it for was there's a texture that's similar to, like, I have VHT like valve cover paint, and it's similar in texture to that. And when I took this to the wire wheel, I did it very lightly to just kind of knock off anything that was loose. And so most of it actually stayed in place. So I'm not going to go so far as stripping all of this off just to redo that to then paint it again. I think there's enough on here that it actually looks pretty good still. This was a little bit rougher. This had been banged up a bit more, and there's a bunch of spots on it where some of the black came off and some of it didn't. And the thing that I don't like is I don't want ridges where some of that paint was coming off to show. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to use sandable primer, the automotive sandable primer, and I'm just going to coat the outside of it. And then once that's dry to the point where I can sand it, I'm going to sand it nice and smooth, and then we'll paint this. And then after that, I think I'm probably going to hit it with the low gloss black. Same thing for the middle. It'll look a little bit different because it won't be textured, so it'll look a little bit shinier than the end bells. So that's kind of a nice contrast, and that's exactly how I did the other motor. So that was a lot of work, a lot of talking. Let's get to some spraying. Got a lot of parts painted already. Got all those unwrapped and untaped and all that fun. So what we're gonna do is start to put some of these things back together. The tag up, you're gonna wanna put this however you want this, whether you want the hole that's open on the bottom or the top. And in my particular case, it also has one on the side, so that doesn't really matter a whole lot. You can just kind of pick which direction you want it. I think I'm going to put it down on mine. The other thing is you had this little bushing that sort of got used for in this hole. That goes in between the box and here. And on mine, there's a little lip that goes in. That goes down into here, not into the junction box, because the hole for the junction box is actually bigger than the hole through the side. Washer and lock nut and nut go on the inside, and the screw comes up from the middle. Next thing is we are going to start with this end, because one of the things we need to do is install our bearing in here. If you order bearings from the Walker Turner serviced machinery, they'll send you, at least they did when I bought them, they sent a little write-up sheet. And one of the things that they talk about, 6202-10 is the one that goes in that bell housing. So that is that one. And then the 6202, the plain one, goes in here. And then they also tell you the order that the shims go. You install all the regular shims that you normally would, then the bearing goes in, and then the shims that they provide to take up that space that the original SKF bearings that had the slightly longer inner race, it takes up that space, solving that problem. The thing that they note is that you install this bearing into the bell housing before you put the centrifugal switch on, because the centrifugal switch is not big enough for the bearing to pass through. We've got all of our original shims in there. We're going to put this in. Trusty wooden dowel, pushing on the outside of the race just to make sure that everything is down. Sure seems to be. This was that little whoopsie that I had. So I got a new screw. It was slightly too big, and then I filed the outside round, and then I also filed it just a little bit shorter, and that goes in to hold our bearing down. So just note, if you're going to take one of these things apart, take that screw out before you put the bearing down. And then these shims are going to end up going on there when we put it in. So we're going to take our stator, and this is going to go in this direction. The way that you can tell is in our end bell, there's this hole here. That hole is for where the capacitor leads come out. First things first, we need to get this installed so that we have it in the correct spot. And somebody before us had an X there and an X here, so I can figure out which way it goes. So that'll go like that, right there. The next thing that we will end up having to do here, we'll just get this tucked into a good spot, is we'll take that, we'll start working on fishing these through, and then we've got to get the whole thing sort of just boop, there. We got the stator in there, we've got the wires for our start capacitor over here. Those got fed through before we set this in place. And then the thing is, there's kind of like these different standoffs all the way around, and the outside of the stator kind of sits on that. And then you want to try to get all of your wires on this side single stacked, single row, whatever. We've got all these wires so that they're flat on here, with one of them that was looped up before. So these are all laying flat, because these are eventually going to have to go up here and then out through the side into our junction box. Stator is all in there. Everything is good to go that way. All the wires I can still see down in there are still arranged flat before they come into here. And then you just want to orientate that in the right direction. Make sure that everything is still fully seated. So I have a hole drilled in that 2x4, and I'm lining it up with where that keyed shaft is going to go, because that's going to eventually have to go down in that, and it's longer, so it's going to go down through the hole. But the thing is, we need to get these shims in there first, so they'll end up on here. Uh-oh. I think my bearings might have been mixed up here. 62-10 is actually the one that's supposed to be down in there. Son of a biscuit. So that's backwards. I'm going to see if I can just take out our start switch and then get that bearing out of there. We will see. All right, I am glad I checked that before we got into it. Now we've got the correct shim on the motor, so that needs to go down into there to, I think, grab a little bit of grease. Let's see if we can get a little bit of that on there. See if we can't, well, it's stuck to the bristle. See if we can't stick this thing on there. Seems good. All right. We are going to line this up with our 2x4 hole. We're going to work on getting that down in there. All right, shim is still there. Just to make sure we're all the way down, we'll lift that up to make sure I wasn't hitting the table. Didn't feel like it. After that, then we have these two shims on here, and this bearing can go on there. I can see down the hole. Oh, yep, that one came out. That one came out. That one came out. Oh, there we go. That one came out too. There's two short ones and two long ones. And the short ones go down on the bottom because they don't pass through that cover. I think I'm just going to get those two in place for now. That kind of gives us a better way to get some of this stuff aligned as we're trying to put the other end bell on it. Let's see if I can get this all the way seated first. This is kind of the tricky part, is we've got our stack up of the prongs towards the bearing and the two shims. What I'm going to do is, since I can reach through the middle, I haven't put the caps in yet, so I'm going to do that last. And what we do is I'm just holding this in there so that I can hold those washers in place while I try to drop everything down, and we'll see. It was pretty good. All right, I got it all flipped over and I got this pounded down to where it needs to be, and now everything is fitting pretty good. So I'm putting these short rods in because I want to test this motor before I get the gear housing all put back together and put back on, because I'm going to put some grease in it and I don't feel like doing that more than once. All right, here's a bunch of junk. Let's see if we can get on there. A nut. Hey, that might work. So I'm going to put one end cap on. This had a wrap of electrical tape on it before. Maybe I should do that just in case it needs it. Should we stuff our foam back in there for old time's sake? Why not? It's good and tight. I like that, so I'm just going to cut the tape, keep the rest of it. For now, I'm just going to reinstall this capacitor that came with it, because I don't really have a reason not to, I guess. So apart from a mess of wires, it's looking pretty good. Before we go any further, let's take a look at these windings. So these are my wires, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 8. And I just have this chart, so we're going to map them out. And obviously ignore the pairs that are the same and the top half, because it'll be the same as the bottom half. So 1 and 2, I measured, there's no conductivity and there's 0 ohms. 1 and 3, there's 1 ohm. 1 and 4, 1 and 5, and 1 and 8 all have no continuity. So 2 and 3 is nothing. 2 and 4 was also 1 ohm, and then 2 and 5, 2 and 8 were both zeros. 3 and 4 is not connected. 3 and 5 is not connected. 3 and 8 is not connected. 4 and 5 are also not connected. 4 and 8 not connected. So 5 and 8, we measured that one at 3 ohms. And so again, don't need to do the other half because these would be all exactly the same, just in the other side. So that tells us that 1 and 3 and 2 and 4 are the low ohm windings, and 5 and 8 is the high winding. But what does that really tell us? So 1 and 3 is at 1, 2 and 4 is at 1, 5 and 8 is at 3 ohms. So I'm measuring the resistance through the windings to see which one is high, which one is low. And it's important to note that 5 and 8 go through the capacitor and through the switch. And I know that on mine because it's completely torn apart, so I can see it. This is what we call a giveaway. So we'll circle back to that in a second. But essentially, what this means is we can take a look at these, and 1 and 3, 2 and 4 being the low resistance, only 1 ohm measured across those two, and the same. These are, these are the run windings, and we know that just because they match and they're low. So the third one, 5 and 8, is 3, and this is our start winding because it's higher resistance because they're usually a little bit smaller wires and they're just not intended to run the entire way. But the giveaway is it goes through the cap and the switch, which again, on mine, is easy to tell because it's all torn apart. But if you can't see in and you just have the wires, this is how you'd figure it out. And based on that and knowing how the wires were connected in my motor when I took it apart, we can see that we've got 8 to the switch, through the capacitor, through the start winding to 5. So that's our starting circuit. And we knew that that was connected 8 and 1, and then 1 goes through one of the run windings to 3. 3 and 2 were connected, and then 2 goes through one of the run windings to 4. And then 4 and 5 were connected, and when a line in came to 8 and 1, and a line in went to 5 and 4. So I was reaching out to the folks at Walker Turner Service Machinery, and they kind of agreed, like, okay, this is weird because my other motor had 4 leads, this one has 6, and they looked at what I had mapped out and went, that is an odd arrangement. What we kind of came up with, which is what I was thinking would have been correct, so we've got our normal start winding, 8 switch caps winding 5, and then we've got 1 through the run winding to 3, so 8 and 1 are connected, and now 3 is connected to 5. And then 3 and 5 is also connected to 2, which goes through one of our run windings and connects to 4. And then in this arrangement, the line in would go to 1 and 8 tied together, and then the other end would go to just 4 by itself. And this would be wired up for 220 volts. So that would be sending the full current in series through 1, 3, and then 2, 4 to get our motor set up. Now let's contrast that with the same start winding. That's not changing, but this time 8 is connected to 1, and then obviously 1 and 3, but we're also going to connect 5 and 3. And then underneath that, instead of being in series, we're going to go in parallel. So 1 and 2 are connected together, and then 3 and 4 are connected together, which puts our run windings in parallel. So 8, 1, and 2 are all connected together to a line in. And then 5, 3, 4 is also connected to a line in. So this would be the configuration for 110 volts. And that is what I'm going to line up shortly. And then this was one of the diagrams from the original plate underneath one of the 6-wire motors that Walker Turner Service Machinery sent me. And that kind of confirmed, like, hey, I might have numbers instead of colors, but this all makes sense and very much lines up with what that original wiring would have been. All this said, I'm not an electrician and I'm not a professional motor rebuilder. I just do this for fun. So this is how I did it, not how you should. Make sure you are comfortable with what you're doing, and if you're not, bring it to somebody that is. So with that, I twisted together the setup for 110. I may end up eventually running this on 220, but that's for a later problem to figure out. And so I've got 1, 2, and 8, and 3, 4, and 5. I've got my testing cord, which is a cord that I pulled off of something. Actually, this might have been the cord that I pulled off the first 1165 that I picked up. But I don't like the style of plug, and the wires aren't the best, but the cord is fine. So I just keep it around because this kind of thing. 2 bundles, and then I'm going to tie in these onto that. So I've got a bundle here. And the main exercise, or the reason for this, is to figure out which direction it's going so that I can make sure I've got it set up correctly, because I obviously don't want to run my saw blade backwards. All right, so I'm going to borrow the power from my other table saw just so I have a switch, and that's not plugged in yet. Clamp the motor down when I fire it up for the first time, just so it doesn't somehow rattle itself off the table, because that wouldn't be fun. So that is there, and I'm going to grab some tape. This way I'll be able to tell which way it's spinning. And your job is to let me know if it lights itself on fire, because I'm going to be over there. Apologies for the mess, but I work here. All right, you ready? I don't know if I'm ready, but we're going to find out soon, aren't we? An important thing for this, earbuds out, so I can hear what's going on with that. The way I like to do this when I'm turning a motor on for the first time is I will bump it on and then off immediately. That way if something goes sideways, I don't need to panic. I'm already turning it off. So I'm going to go on and off right away just to see if it spins up. That seemed pretty good. And the start winding turned off, so that's good. Sounds pretty good. Obviously it's on a wooden table, so that's going to make it sound a little different, but sure seems pretty good to me. I'm gonna plug this. I think we're good there. That was spinning this way. I'm gonna mark that. No, I'm not, because I got rid of all my stuff. So that was spinning that way. That means it was going counterclockwise as you're staring at this side of it. Makes sense, because the gear will spin counterclockwise, and then it engages with the arbor, which would then spin the arbor clockwise. And since the motor will be on the right-hand side of the table saw, so if this is spinning backwards, it goes through the gear, spins forward, that means they're going the right way. Sweet. Just a point of reference, the other motor, it's got the same arrangement where you've got both ends of the one side of the run windings here, and then these two are the other end. And these are soldered internally at the winding. So the start winding and the start switch, and then obviously the capacitor, is all wired internally, so you don't actually have the opportunity to flip this around. With that, I'm happy. So I'm gonna pop in my covers here. I was holding off on that just in case I needed to do anything else. So I'm gonna push that in. Put this in right side up. Then we'll get our set screw here. Once again, these are the parts that we're going to be putting on. We've got the seal, you've got the cone, don't forget your key. Then you've got your gear, you've got the spring washer, get the reinforced washer, then you've got the bolt. So that's our order. That all goes on here. Let's get on it. Now we've got our front gear arbor. We're going to get that put together. This is a little bit more tricky and slightly more obnoxious. So these are both 6203 2RS. Basically what it is we've got that fiber washer, the seal. This bearing goes all the way down. And then after that bearing, we'll have a sleeve. And then after the sleeve goes our gear. And after our gear goes a washer. And after our washer goes the other bearing. And then there is the washer, lock washer, and bolt that goes in the end of that and holds everything in place. Got it? Good. And then our sleeve goes on from there. Then after that, this goes on. Here's where it gets tricky. That goes on, but it has to go in first. This was the hardest part on the last one that I did, which was getting this gear in place, because we have a key and we have to get that key both in the gear and in the arbor shaft all at the same time. So we've got our key in, and now we got to work on getting all of that in so that we can get our bearing in. And that is where I had this one. All right, and I wanted to make sure that I was started on my bearing before I start pounding this on. All right, now we hit our shaft, and our key is still in there, so that's good. So what we're gonna have to start doing is pushing this in. So this goes in, and then we'll have to work back and forth on getting the whole thing down, and then getting that gear down as well. That driven in a little bit further. Now we're gonna have to drive our gear in. That's too big. Okay, so this was the one that fit over that before, so we're gonna continue to use that. Probably shouldn't use that one. That's fine for now. So then we are going to put on our washer, and then our next bearing goes on here. Pretty much knocked that back to where it was supposed to be. I have them lined up where that seal, there's a little kind of divot, I guess, from the original set screws, and that was in there. That's where they need to be, so set screws in place. And just making sure that that still spins freely and that gear doesn't rub anything. And we're good. So I'm going to put our reinforced washer, our lock washer, and our bolt. We've got our Arbor Assembly put together. The next thing would be to put it on there. One of the things when I was talking to Walker Turner Serviced Machines, they mentioned that I asked if there was any gaskets or anything like that, because neither one of my motors I recalled having a gasket in between here, but they said a paper gasket, just something like a manila folder or like a filing folder, whatever, was sufficient. So I have some, whatever it is, 3046, I think, the Felpro paper gasket, and I just cut it on the laser, so that'll go here in between. And then we also got to put a bunch of grease in there. So I asked about the grease as well, if they had anything specific, and what they said was the red and tacky was fine, so this will get the job done just fine, and we'll go ahead and use that to put it all in there. What I'm going to do is slather that with grease, probably get some grease on here, see how big of a mess we can make. How much was on this thing before? I'm guessing we're not going to be too concerned about adding too much, so I'm going to grab a glove and we will get to working on that. So I'm just making sure that we get a good coating on here. That way we just don't have to worry about this being dry when we start it up, because I certainly don't want that. And I'll probably do the same thing on that other gear. I'll probably just brush a ton on there as well. I really wish I had a tub. That would have made that a lot easier. And here I'm going to put a bunch as well. I think that is a sufficiently large amount of excess. I'm going to grab my 3 bolts here, and now we put this on. One, two, 3 bolts in, and then the long rods that go in the top, and that feels pretty good to me. So let's throw that on, and we'll put this on. What do you think? Should we hook it up one more time? Give her a spin? Call it good? I'm on board with that. What do you think? Should we make it a little bit more interesting? Throw a saw blade on it? Yeah? Okay, maybe not a real one, but why not? Remember to unplug anytime you're doing blade work. Nice high quality 5.5-inch blade there, huh? Cardboard. And yeah, I do know that this actually could probably hurt something, so we are going to be actually pretty careful. All right, all right. Bump start worked. Nice. I think we're in business. All right, well, that's pretty much going to do it for this one. We got the motor torn apart, repaired, painted, put back together, greased up, threw a saw blade on it, and gave it a spin. So I think that'll do it for this one, because that was already a lot. At least it felt like a lot. And there is a bunch of stuff to get it onto the table saw and get it all aligned and get everything worked up. But that will be next, so make sure you subscribe if you want to catch that one. And I appreciate those of you that stuck around this far, and I certainly appreciate those of you that have been reminding me to continue working on this. There's actually been a decent number of people that have been asking about this, so this one's for you. Hopefully the next one will be less than a year. Anyway, I will catch you in the next one.